This is the injury report presented by NYU Langone Health. Here's something for you guys to keep an eye on this season. NFL clubs have voted unanimously to remove the hip drop tackle from the game. And if you don't know what a hip drop tackle is, it happens when a defender wraps up a ball carrier, rotates, or even swivels his hips, drops down onto the ball carrier's legs to bring them down during the tackle, and that's when the injury goes down. So in today's injury report, we're talking with Dr. Guillem Gonzalez-Lomas, sports orthopedic surgeon over at NYU Langone Health, on why this ban is necessary. Doc, I'm going to ask you this question real quick. Don't laugh at me because I have to say it in this voice. Are you ready for some football?
Oh, yeah.
Football's back. You ready?
Off season's been too long, yeah.
All right, let's get straight into this because a lot of people are saying the game is getting softer. When it comes to this tackle, I would say it's getting smarter. The NFL analyzed over 20,000 tackles, and they found out that the hip drop tackles cause lower extremity injuries at a rate 20 times higher than other tackles. Break it down for us, Doc. Why is that?
Yeah, well, just like you mentioned, Brandon, that the hip drop tackle is where the defensive player wraps their arms. They basically get purchase on the offensive player and then essentially become a 200-plus pound pendulum that just got wrapped around and is swinging. And that leads to a tremendous amount of torque. The second part of the hip drop tackle is what you mentioned, landing on usually the lower extremities of that offensive player. So the risk of injury of having this large pendulum swinging and then landing on someone who's running with a pretty good head of steam usually is very high. And that's the concern that a lot of coaches had expressed. And ultimately, this is a question of player safety. So I think this is, in my opinion, a no-brainer. This was a tackle that led to a very high rate of injury. And that's not something that you want at any time, but certainly not when, you want to maintain these incredible athletes on the field as long as possible.
Yeah, and we, the players, we talked about how the likeliness or the likelihood of this tackle actually happening is low percentage-wise. No one thinks to go in and hip drop a guy, but when it happens to your team, it can be detrimental. I mean, you think about last year when Ravens tight end Mark Andrews suffered a fractured fibula and ligament damage after he was hip drop tackled. He ended up being out for 2 months. I know they still went on to lose in the AFC Championship game, but who knows? It could have had a higher seed. They lost some games with Mark Andrews out. So could it have been worse for Mark Andrews with that tackle?
Absolutely. So again, just getting down to a question of physics, you've got this, two big guys going at a high rate of speed, a lot of energy there. And one of them is essentially just become airborne and going to come down with a lot of force on the lower body of that offensive player. So you could have a lower body injury, lower extremity injury, like an ankle sprain, a high ankle sprain, which is what Andrew sustained. But that force could have been transmitted all the way up to the knee, even at the hip. And we've seen some pretty gruesome injuries, things like multi-ligament knees, hip injuries, that in some cases have been career-ending. So absolutely could have been worse. And I think, again, just a very sane decision by the league to try to limit this tackle.
The more and more you break it down, I'm leaning over to your side because everyone's talking about sports science, and then you mention physics. Anytime someone mentions physics, I'm like, all right, but you got me. You threw out the big joker on that one. But it's hard to get these players involved, Doc, because we can do tackling drills until we're blue in the face at practice on proper form, proper technique. But when you're out there on the field and you got to get down a guy like Derrick Henry, who's 6'4", 250 pounds, runs 4.4. You got to get him down on third down to get your team up off the field. You're not thinking of the proper way to tackle someone. So in your opinion, can this type of tackle be unlearned from the athletes, or do you think it's something that has to happen to the right player at the wrong time to get everyone, both players and coaches, on board with the ban?
Well, look, I think that, we know in a game everything happens very quickly. And in a split second, it's hard to say, what you're going to do. But I also think these are professionals. These people know their bodies extremely well. They know how to tackle, and they know when, to become airborne or not, right? I mean, that's a pretty straightforward decision. If you're going to, get your hips up and just drop like a rock, or you're going to do a more standard tackle, which is ultimately safer. So I think the answer to your question is complicated. You're going to have incidents where some of these tackles do still happen, but I think it's important for the league to flag it, to have the defensive coordinators train their players, have the players try to get this out of their lexicon of tackling. And ultimately, I think that's going to drop the rate of these tackles. Will they still happen occasionally? I think that's one of those things that, you probably can't eliminate fully in the heat of the moment. But I think it's important to make the effort to at least limit the number of these tackles that occur.
You know the best way to get players to stop doing something, Doc? Take money from them. A 15-yard penalty is one thing. It hurts the defense or it puts your team in a terrible situation in which, as players, we never want to do. But once you start seeing that check getting a little bit lighter, that's going to get some guys to get their head up and tackle the right way, as opposed to dropping down and maybe potentially giving some guys some career-ending injury. Doc, thanks for hanging out with us. Sorry you had to hear me sing at the beginning, but football's back, baby.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to get on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Thursday on that screen and see what goes down this year.
Yes, sir. Thanks for hopping on with us.